Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Special Finance Committee meeting of October 23rd, 2025. I acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Siano and South First Nations. The District of Metchosin is committed to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and we recognize, honor, and respect the presence of Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future. Please be sure to have your cell phones turned off during the meeting. Committee, we have an agenda before you. Are there any additions or approvals that need to, or additions?
2 letters, one from Darren Brown, one from Brian Graham, to be added to the agenda. Make a motion to approve the agenda with the additions.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Second, moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And public participation. This section of the agenda, we invite public to come to the mic. When you do, please press the button to turn the mic on. There will be a little red light to indicate that it is active. You will have 4 minutes to speak. There is a green light that signals your start. The yellow provides about a 30-second warning, and the red light marks the end of your allotted time. We ask that all speakers present their comments respectfully to council, staff, and visitors in the gallery this afternoon, and that you address your comments to the chair. Thank you. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Thank you, Betty Hildreth. I'm here to reinforce MACA's willingness to contribute additional funds for common costs at 4495 Happy Valley Road, Metchosin Elementary School site. We realize this additional cost to MACA is not an arts and cultural issue, but it's a factor of being in an aged building. Plus the fact that business tenants on the commercial side have been delayed in getting established, so rooms are sitting vacant and no rent is coming to the district. For this reason, MACA is called upon annually to justify their lease, their service agreement, and their carefully drafted zero-based budget. MACA directors have agreed to rework our budget and offer what we can to increase common cost contributions by yet to be negotiated percentage increase over the next 5 years. So we ask that council, in the interest of budget projections, instruct senior staff to solidify a draft lease agreement with MACA for the next 5-year duration. This current exercise of honing in on the tight budget also brings up the question, do other district subsidized associations and societies contribute to a common cost? We've been told that the district has to continually justify to a few naysayers that they are subsidizing MACA, when, in fact, our tax dollars are subsidizing each of the voluntary associations that pay $1 a year in rent for the use of district-owned facilities. The 2 museums, the community house, the farmers market area, the equestrian ring, and the seniors resource center. So thank you on behalf of MACA for considering our request to finalize a renewed lease.
Thank you. Next. You turn the mic on there, please, Mr. Vanderwater.
There we go.
Thank you.
So, I'm here with a proposal that could possibly save the white elephants and reduce the deficit to the district. And that is if the district would consider an administrator wish we could share the responsibilities with MACA, because we've got lots of administrative duties that need doing, and we already hire a part-time administrator. And I think it would be a big saving to the district, because it would be on a contractual basis paid by MACA, so it would save a whole pile of bookkeeping. And you could deduct all the costs that the district is assuming by trying to manage the center from here, which doesn't work. And if there was an administrator on site, they could react quite quickly to all the different problems that come up. I don't know, Stephanie's been there. And so it was good when Stephanie was there. There was things happened a lot quicker. So I think that if we had shared an administrator, it would be really good. And that would help. We could have comprehensive advertising campaign. I know the district hasn't done any advertising about anything over there, but I think that if we had an advertising campaign, that would make a big difference. Most people in Metchosin, most taxpayers don't even know what the center's about. So that's another reason I think it's good. And so if MACA had some autonomy to direct the, well, if we're going to fund them, to direct the administrator, I can see that the district, all they would have to do eventually was just sit back and let the money roll in and think about what kind of improvements they'd like to make. So I think everything else is being tried. So let's try this. It could be a very positive outcome to it. MACA's got some, if we successfully negotiate our lease, we've got some dynamite plans coming up for the future that will make Metchosin really proud. And, of course, it'll require more administration. So that's another reason we want to partner up with the district on this issue. Thanks.
Mr. Vanderwater, the mayor has a question for you, please.
Turn it on.
Nope, leave it on. And if you could just stand there for a moment. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, through the chair, I just have a question for Mr. Vanderwater. Were you thinking of a 1.0 FTE full-time equivalent, or were you thinking about a 0.5 full-time equivalent? What were your thoughts regarding this administrator? I was just wondering if you could give us a little bit more
number
information.
of hours?
Yeah,
That's
so like a 40-hour week or a 20-hour week, or?
I think I think in this case we have to respond to the demand, because there's no sense having a full-time administrator if it's not going to pay for it. But I know a lot of it can be done on the internet, and so I'm hoping that we can start with a part-time administrator. I think as things get busier, there will be a requirement for more hours to be put in.
Yeah, I think the problem with the on-demand was when the fire chief was responding, she was responding 24/7, and we certainly couldn't afford to hire an administrator for the 24/7.
Yeah, but then, you know, she was special interest group too. So, I mean, no offense meant, but I think that's somebody who's, of course, it'll have to be somebody that's around here, because there's lots of night events, or there should be, where the administrator has to come and whatever, take tickets or something, or organize. There's going to be problems. There's always problems. So that's what I mean by MACA can be quicker on their feet than the district, because we can just say, email and say, okay, we don't need all that administration. So,
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
you bet.
Good afternoon. My name is Yvonne Becker, and I'm the president of the Metchosin Health Society. I just wanted to reinstate our concern regarding the recent decision to limit permissive tax exemptions to the municipal portion for only 2026. and reinstate that the hall is not a privately owned nonprofit property. The land and the building are owned collectively by the citizens of Metchosin, and they're held in trust by a duly appointed board of trustees. And the society's role is administrative, maintaining and operating the facility for common use. For more than 4 decades, the hall's full exemption has recognized its unique status as a public asset rather than a private organization. So applying the new nonprofit criteria to the hall appears inconsistent with both the land and title and the intent of the original trust. This change would in fact require the residents of Metchosin to pay taxes on property they already own. So I'm hoping that the council would confirm the hall's classification, defer any changes until consultations occur, and provide a written clarification before the 2026 budget is finalized. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your continued service to our community.
Thank you. And the street that you live on, please, for the recordings.
Oh, 1293 Liberty Drive, Victoria, BC.
And
Metchosin.
And the mayor has a question for you.
Yeah, just a comment. I've reached out to all of the nonprofits that were noted in the reports, the 7 nonprofits in addition to the community hall. I'm meeting with, I've forgotten his name. I think it's tomorrow during the day to discuss the hall. Are you a part of that discussion?
No, I have not been part of it, but we do have a liaison for the hall, and I wish that, you know, we could organize something with her, seeing as we never heard anything about this. It kind of came
Right.
sideways at us, and that should be her really area.
Right. So Jay Shukin will be at the meeting as well. I'm sorry, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but we do have that meeting, but we can have other meetings as well.
Okay, I think it needs to be discussed collectively among our
I agree.
society, and then we come together with a formal decision on that. I just don't want to speak out of turn without consulting the rest of them. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Well, maybe I could just ask through the chair of the mayor. So there's meetings organized with yourself and Councillor Shukin to speak to the different groups?
Yeah, I was with Councillor Shukin, CFO Creek, and myself. I've had a meeting with, we've had a meeting with a couple of chaps from the St. Mary's Church, CFO Creek, CAO Bob Hyatt, and myself have a meeting with the Anglican Diocese next week. We also have a meeting with BC Parks scheduled for next week. We've got a meeting with Penny Stone for the Victoria Humane Society scheduled sometime after Monday, she said, and the YWCA as well. And to those who have not responded, I will send another email.
Well, I never got anything regarding this, and I did submit a letter as well. So this is the first I'm hearing of it. But,
I asked the CFO for the list on the information that came into the district with the permissive tax exemptions, and that's the email that I responded to.
okay, I didn't see that. So
I can send it to you. I can get your email from our deputy corporate officer, and I can send it to you.
okay, thank you.
And through the chair, could I just ask what the purpose of the meetings is?
The purpose
We
of
hadn't heard about them until now.
Yeah, the purpose of the meeting is to explain what permissive tax exemption is, to explain the series of events that led up to the decision on September 15th, as well as to hear their concerns. We had heard at the public meeting and certainly in the media that many of the groups felt blindsided by that. And what I told the chaps from the St. Mary's Church in the meeting that we had this week was absolutely that was a mistake of mine, was not having a communication plan in place. And I apologize for that, and I regret that, and that's on me. And that's what I explained to them, but it was mostly to hear their concerns.
But if I could just ask, so there wouldn't be a communication plan because it was only decided that night. We hadn't talked about.
Yeah, that was Monday, September 15th. I could have decided on a communication plan on September 16th.
You can sit down, Ms. Becker. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Please come on up.
Please, somewhere right now. So thank you for letting me go next. June Reimer, 4730 Marydale Road, and I am speaking to the little hoopla about all the nonprofits losing their taxes or their tax help. I have volunteered for a number of years with Wild Ark. They actually come and get supplies from me for the animals year round, and in the summer sometimes 2-3 times a week. I used to deliver them, but they often need so many, but they often, I recognize that they are financially always quite strapped. The vehicles are often broken down or they're needing parts. They're flipping tools and whatever. But I also know that they do a wonderful job of their volunteers, and I think many of them students that are doing practicums for their university. As a matter of fact, I believe that Alicia Becker was one of those and is now doing amazing things in the veterinarian world. So it's a very important organization to me, and I realize how tight it is. They had a fabulous little thank you to the volunteers the other night at the community hall, and the young people cooked and brought potluck, and we're so appreciative. But the volunteers even there were not aware of what was happening, and that was just within the last week. So I would like to read something to you. It's a little disjointed because I whipped it off just before I went out the door, and it's something I had posted, but I just don't know that all of you quite understand, and I'd like to get my feelings across. And the subject is council listening? Many of us in Metchosin seem to feel quite strongly that council, and in particular 3 members of council in particular, are not listening to the general public. And it feels to us that they almost have a personal agenda to push through. I would like to think that we might be mistaken, but it is not seeming that way. It seemed to be so about the fire hall, but it is certainly more so about taxing the nonprofits without giving anyone, and in particular the nonprofits themselves, any notice, and not giving members of the community enough time to pass the word around and have people react and decide how they feel, and many feel quite strongly and unfavorably. I believe it would be very beneficial if council took this as an opportunity to show us that they are listening, because it's not too late for them to change their mind, and this is directed to 3 members in particular. I understand, have been told it's too late to hold a special meeting or a hearing, though even that I beg to differ. I think that you could get notice out on the fire hall and community house signs and that there's an urgent meeting to be held. However, back to my original point, it's only 3 out of 5 who voted this way, which for something this major, I would feel it should be all 5 on side, as well as definitely finding out what citizens want, so they could actually come forward and say, yes, we are listening. We realize that a large number of you are not happy about our 3 out of 5 decision, and although we 3 still believe this is something that should be done, we are willing to put it off for 1 more year, and we will having a hearing about it down the road, or next month, or in the new year. For council not be willing to listen to their constituents speaks volumes. And I'd really be interested in how many letters and phone calls you are getting in favor of your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just push the button here.
No, it was already on.
Already on. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
To me. Okay. So my name is Kathy Banning. I live on Souk Road. So first of all, I'd like to just mention how difficult it is for anyone working full-time or with kids to make a meeting at 4 p.m. Evening meetings or a call-in option would be a nice alternative if possible. So Metchosin's a rural community and we want to keep it that way. We don't want to be forced to develop our rural community to cover skyrocketing costs. So my husband and I have lived in Metchosin for over 25 years and we're raising our 2 children here. We were both members of the Metchosin Fire Department for years, and the fire hall was quite literally our second home for many years. We're very concerned with the direction this mayor and council is going. So I like to share the personal impact on my family so you can put a face to numbers when making decisions impacting property taxes. So over the last 3 years, our property taxes have increased by 37%. That's right, 37%. So we paid $2,020 more this year than we did 3 years ago. Our 2025 taxes were almost $7,500. Mr. Creek's summary states to avoid significant tax increases in the future, new sources of revenue will need to be found. And I think we all know what that means, and that's probably not what most of us would like to see. So please listen to his warning as your decisions impact all Metchosin property owners. Also, please be aware the impact isn't shared equally across all property owners. Those with farm status and lower property values pay a smaller share, and those without farm status and higher property values pay a larger share. My husband and I are paying 83% more than the average property tax amounts provided by Mr. Creek in his reports. For a 3-bedroom, 3.5-bath house, only changes in the last 3 years is our house is 3 years older, the appliances are starting to break down, and it needs another coat of paint. I think in addition to providing average property increases, it would be helpful for mayor and council to request the maximum and minimum impacts along with the numbers of properties in various ranges so there's a clearer picture of how your decisions are impacting individual property owners. So I'm a CPA and I've done forecasts of how much our property taxes will be in 5 years. So at a 5% increase, it's $9,500. A 10% increase, it's $12,000 in 5 years. And that's not factoring in borrowing the $7 to $13 million for new fire hall or the increased policing costs in the coming years. So if Metchosin borrows $7 million over 30 years, the debt servicing costs will increase our property taxes by an extra $412 per year. $13 million would be $765 per year for 30 years, on top of all the other inflationary increases. So my husband and I are within the 5 to 10 year window for retirement, and I honestly don't know if we'll be able to continue to live in Metchosin when we choose to retire, after we've lived here for 30 to 35 years. I know for a fact our children certainly won't be able to continue to live in Metchosin when they are young adults. I urge this mayor and council to really review the numbers and all options available to ensure spending is kept in check and is affordable for all Metchosin property owners. Every $30,000 in extra spending translates to a 1% tax increase. Your decisions over the next year are going to have long-lasting effects. Please make the right choices so Metchosin isn't forced to lose its rural nature to pay for excessive costs and spending. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nicole Sheehan, Levon Road resident. Thanks. I actually didn't stand up to talk about what the previous speaker just mentioned, but I have to say I wasn't aware until CFO Creek's report on that he gave on September 15th that the average taxpayer did absorb the cost of tax exemptions to the degree that they did, up to almost $100 extra on the average taxpayer just for the exempted amounts alone. And so, fortunately, we're in a position where that doesn't hurt as much as it does for some landowners and people in Metchosin who are absorbing that extra cost. What I wanted to talk about is a comment that, again, CFO Creek made in his really excellent report on September 15th about reserves and replacement costs. And one of the things that you said, Mr. Creek, is that the roads reserve is the big kicker and is the drain on other reserves. And so I just want to ask council this year to really bring some new thinking to the roads reserve, because we pump $1 million into that reserve. It is a huge amount that is going into roads in Metchosin. And, I think it's a matter of priorities. Do we value roads more than we do emergency fire services and first responder services? Do we value perfectly paved roads in this rural community more than other needs? And I just want to, again, sort of salute the repainting of the portion of road on Duke Road East, because one of the creative ideas that might be brought to the broader roads philosophy in Metchosin is narrowing roads. That would save a lot on repaving. There's a growing movement for skinny roads or narrow roads, 6 meters for two-way traffic. Paint the lines. If you paint lines that create active transportation corridors, you not only save on the cost of roads, but you cultivate healthy communities. And you also, I think, would save on the cost of shouldering, because you're not sort of eroding the edges of roads. You've actually painted lines in. So that's one idea. The skinny roads movement is really interesting. The other movement, which is more radical, I don't know if I totally go there, is unpaving. So there's a large movement to unpave roads in rural communities, just those roads that are infrequently used. So you wouldn't unpave your main arteries, but gravel roads, like when I grew up, the sign that you were in a rural community is you got off the paved road and suddenly you're on gravel. And I think that roads, along with water, city water and sewer, are the things that lead to development. So you got nice, perfect roads, development often follows. So I think I'd love to see that be part of the discussion. And I think the roads reserve, if we can stop it being a drain on the overall budget, that would go a long way to addressing people's concerns. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Anybody? No? Okay, so we will move on to the next part of our agenda, which is reports. And I would like to ask CFO Mr. Crete to come to the podium, please, and do a presentation with us.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess it's already been 1 year, so we're back at it. We'll just cover a quick highlight of what was going on in 2025. So, of course, big one was Ecom 911 coming down from the province. Our total cost on that for the year was $103,590. We had a new team member in Public Works in June. And then QP staff, they had wage adjustments kind of mid-year to get to the regional average, as well as some step adjustments for staff that have been here for a number of years. We started working on the fire hall due to the leaky roof. So there's the roof renovation, which was just completed. And then there's also a couple other assorted health measures taking place that have been completed and are still ongoing. And then for 2025, the average residential property tax increase was 4.5%, or $65.34. 26 of that went off to the RCMP and Ecom. Wrong way. Sorry. Anyway, and so just did a quick comparison to the other municipalities in the CRD. Metchosin there in the green at 45, and see how even the Highlands was close to $150 per household. And this shows, as previously mentioned by a resident here, the $30,000 per 1% increase in tax. Highlands is just a little bit lower than Metchosin. They get about $26,700, and then escalates from there. I figured this was a little weird to look at. So I broke it down by population. And so from a 1% tax increase, each person contributes $5.75. Langford's the next closest at $6.42, and Souk is $7.16. And then a different way to look at it, since we can't tax each individual person, is per household. And so by household in Metchosin, it's $14.93, just a little bit higher than the $14.43 that I've calculated with property taxes. I think just based on the number of households is based on what BC Stats has, which I don't know how accurately matches up to what we actually see in BC assessment data. And so Langford, they're at $15.62, and Souk is over at $17.15. So we'll talk about the changes coming up for the 2026 to 2030 financial plan. So for council, we are adding back in the $5,000 for treaty council that was removed in 2025. The wage adjustment, which is based on Victoria's CPI, based on chosen policy, it's currently at 2.1%. We'll get the final number come, I think it's February, March of 2026. And then there's discussion of adding health benefits for counselors. But I discussed that with the other CFOs in the CRD. It seems about 50-50 split on some do, some don't. So I'll leave that up for you guys to discuss. General administration. So the big thing for 2026, we've got the election coming up in October. We're going to be able to pull $26,000 of that cost out of reserve that have been saved over the last 3 years. We've got the QB negotiations for wages and benefits. That's happening near the end of November. Hopefully we'll have something before the end of the year. But right now, based on projections, we're looking at about a $73,000 increase in costs. And then the big one is the change in grant and aid because of the property tax exemptions just being for the municipal portion. So we've added $102,000 to that. Now that is offset by the increase in taxable assessment, so it doesn't actually have an impact on taxation for anybody. Next up, bylaw and building inspection. So no major changes in either of these departments for 2026, but we do have the CRD bylaw contract expiring at the end of 2026, and they had indicated that they're looking at a significant increase because the CRD had not reviewed that in quite some time apparently. So somebody finally identified they're losing money on what our contract is. There. Planning. So nothing big in 2026. We've just completed that housing needs assessment here, which was thankfully funded by the province. But we've got a revised housing needs assessment coming up in 2028, and it sounds like we're not expecting any grant funding for that one. And then there is another OCP review to happen by the end of 2030. So there are some increased costs coming down the line there. The school, currently no changes to the operating expenses. Revenues definitely picked up thanks to pickleball, new lease with the Wellness Collective showing up in 2026. And then there's a few other negotiations happening in the background. Public Works. So with the road work that was done this year, they went over budget on shouldering because they had to do a lot of shoulder work prior to the paving. So I've added additional funding in there of $20,000 to help cover off the gravel and getting things up to grade. And then also additional funding for equipment maintenance. Talking with Public Works, it's like it's been pushed off or delayed for a number of years. So I plan on using the Public Works Efficiency Reserve to pay for most of that in 2026, and then just small increases over 27 through 30 to help pay for that. And then save a little bit of money with reduced road maintenance budget due to less crack sealing. Again, the current asset management plan for roads involves a lot of new paving. Fire, so we're looking at increased costs for repairs and maintenance for the fire hall in order to get everything up to a healthy and safety standard for the volunteers in there. And then we're adding an additional $2,000 for first responder equipment and an additional $5,000 for firefighter equipment. And the big one is policing. So based on the budget that they sent to us near the end of July, early August, we're looking at contracted expenses going up by $208,000. That was originally budgeted for $100,000 in the 2025 through 2029 budget. This will be partially offset by reserve. And then we've got Ecom 911. That is going to be a full year, so that's an additional $55,000 there. Also, again, partially offset by our reserves. And then we got the Vancouver Island Integrated Major Crimes Unit coming in place. So This is the number that I was quoted last year when it was supposed to happen in this year. Did not happen this year, so I put it back in. I've got a discussion with the other CFOs of the CRD on November 14th, exactly how everybody else is playing with this number in their budget and what they've heard. Hopefully get some final information there. And here's a summary that is on page 7. Doesn't look so good on a PowerPoint because it's a little too much words and just trying to fit it in there. But it summarizes everything that's going on there. So total increase in general administration of $248,000. Protective services is $360,000. The planning department is going down by just under 10. Public works just over 13,000. Parks and Rec is going down by 60,000. Amortization, budgeting for the asset retirement obligations for the old buildings in Metchosin, and then just some reserve allocations. So adding in the asset management of 1% for a year going forward, and then just the transfers for West Shore Parks and Rec, reserve for capital projects, gas tax, the election, fire policy, all those good things. So looking at this going forward, covering off those expenses, in 2025, the district budgeted for $5.5 million of revenue, 60% of which came from property taxes, or $3.3 million. We received $1.5 million from the federal government for payment in lieu of taxes, or PILT. I budgeted for losing this in 2028 on the Mary Hill property. In 2025, we received $154,000 from the federal government from Mary Hill. When that is transferred over to Shiano, that will disappear. They also pay those other taxing authorities $243,000. So in total, $397,000. It'll probably be a little bit higher by 2028, just because of the tax increases in 26 and 27. Not entirely sure. I don't actually have a final date on when that line transfer is supposed to be taking place, but just kind of a placeholder. User fees generated $500,000 or 9.5%, and then interest budgeted for $186,000 or 3.3%. We've got this sliding down from 160 in 2026 down to 100,000 by 2030, based on the estimate of interest rates going down. So they're supposed to be cutting on the 26th, so I guess next week, or yeah. And then who knows where it kind of goes from there, based on the economy, etc. So if it's higher, great. Then it'll end up being contributed to reserve, or we can find a way to reduce our property tax increases going forward. So since it's a 5-year plan, there are a number of risks to all of the assumptions that kind of went into this plan. Inflation is a big one. Right now, we're estimating inflation of about, what did I say in here, 2%? 2 or 3% on administration, 5% on emergency services. Contracts, we have a number of those being renegotiated for a number of different users. We got West Shore Parks and Rec, GVLRA, and the RCMP. Their collective agreement actually expired for their regular unit March of this year. The last one was just ratified in June of 2024. So they, as far as I can tell, they haven't actually started negotiating their new one, but they have a different agreement for their civilian members, which had just been signed in July of 2025. It's effective November of this year, and they're looking at a 6.6% increase in pay for all their members in that. Environmental impacts. So again, we know storms, that increases the cost for public works, going out and cleaning up branches, trees that are falling at night, overtime costs, whatever might else happen. We've got a lot of aging infrastructure in Metchosin that has to be taken care of. So saving again for asset management, adding more into reserve to help repair and replace assets when they need to be. Interest rates, again, supposed to be cut. Don't know how far it's going to go, when it might go back up. And then grant funding as well. We rely on $500,000 coming from the province for small communities. We get right now $200,000 for Fire Smart funding. and a couple other items. Whether or not these stay at these levels, iffy, because the province itself has a significant deficit, and just like the federal government, they're looking at a number of cost-cutting measures to save money. And then the other one that goes with that is the provincial downloading that we've been seeing. So that'll, who knows what they're going to say municipalities are now responsible for in the future. But if it's anything like ecom, if we add another 100,000, that's an easy 3.25% tax increase just on that. So here we go for the financial plan assumptions. So 2% on admin, 5% emergency, and then interest rates at 3% currently, and then declining to 2% by 2030. So in summary, the most significant known changes here. So we've got the RCMP increases, we've got the loss of Mary Hill Pilt by 2030, and these changes in themselves will result in an equivalent tax increase of about 35%. So let me break this down for you. In 2026, we're scheduled to use $400,000 out of our police reserve to offset RCMP costs. That whittles its way down to $100,000 by 2030. So that $400,000 is equivalent to 13.5%. The increase in costs from the RCMP between 2026 and 2030 is equivalent to another 16.5%. And the loss of Mary Hill at 154,000 is 5%. And then the additional other taxing authorities as well. So that's where we're looking at plus 35%, likely in the 40 range. The most significant unknown cost coming forward is related to the fire hall, whether that's a new fire hall build or a renovation. Either way, it's going to be a significant cost on our balance sheet. Amortizing even just the renovation of it is going to be far higher than what we're doing right now. We've got $5,000 left on the structure of the apparatus bay itself. If we put in even just $3 million into a new building, you're looking at that 30 times. So again, $150,000 a year need to be contributed for the eventual replacement of that fire hall in the future. Now, there was an email earlier from Mr. Brown about the police reserve allocation. And so right now, this is how I've got it going in the current draft budget. So the annual drawdown starts at 404, then 330, 242, 176, and 101. Now, yesterday we received a bill from the city of Langford for the accommodation cost for RCMP. The province was paying that until the end of 2024, and then nobody that bills for that noticed that until last month. So we just received a bill for $71,000. So I believe we're not going to have the 1.25 million sitting in our police reserve at the end of 2025. We'll have to wait to see what the final bill from the RCMP is, along with their annual adjustment, to see what's actually left. But this is based on 1.2. I did it this way in order to have a sort of even tax increase each year for the next 5 years. If you want a lower police tax increase in 2026, we can pull more reserve down from the other years and increase the tax in that year. Let Jazz debate that one, but that's how I've shown it so far. So we'll go back to this one. So a number of new costs. RCMP is the biggest one, and it's, as far as I can tell, there's no way out of that guy. So when we add that to our regular cost of operations for everything else, if you took the 35%, spread that over 5 years, you're looking at 7% a year just for the RCMP and the loss of the PILT. You add on 3% for, 2% for our operations, 1% for asset management, and you're looking at 10% tax increase every year for 5 years. So that's based on the current tax base, current user fees, etc. So we can play with the user fees. Again, said it was about $500,000. So if we increase those fees by 10%, we'll get another $50,000. So if we did 10% every year for 5 years, we generate another $250,000. And then our other lever, again, is property taxes. So, discussion, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Creek. That's a lot of information. Committee, questions for Mr. Creek? Councilor Shukin.
Could I have Mr. Creek run through his percentage escalator, just the thing you mentioned just a second ago?
Yeah, for
1%, 2%, like
through chair.
you just calculated the 10% increase over 5 years, but I just wanted to get the breakdown one more time.
Through chair, absolutely. So I based that on we'll be seeing at least a 35% tax increase because of the RCMP costs and then the loss of the PILT in 2028 from Mary Hill. So the 35% spread over those 5 years, 7% a year. Okay. And then we've got 2% just base case for wages, supplies, just for the regular operations that we're currently doing. And then 1% to go into asset management. So adding into the reserve so we have more money for replacing roads, equipment, buildings, that type of thing.
Other questions, committee? Councilor Gray?
Well, just looking at that, so we're saying, or I'm through the chair, I think you're saying, Mr. Creek, we expect a 10% tax increase every year just on the police, the PILT, our base and asset management. And so if the current fire hall plan would be, I think you showed us figures that were 15 to 30% tax increase for that. The boarding of $7 million, I think it was based on. And then an additional tax increase of something like 15% for the operations of the new hall. So ending up being like 30 to 45% tax increase with the current numbers around the fire hall if we're successful getting a grant. So do we add that 45% tax increase to the 10% if the fire hall proceeded as planned?
Through chair, I'm going to have to trust you on the numbers there. I haven't looked at it in a little bit. Went into this thing, but yeah, the main cost of that new fire hall. Again, if it was that $21 million option, it came in at 21. Like the amortization of that building itself was $545,000, and that's the bulk of that increased cost. So it's not so much. It's kind of part of the operation, right? Where it's like, okay, we're gonna have to replace this building again in 75 years. So the number on that is astronomical. It's like $210 million based on regular inflation in 75 years. But yeah, that's where that $500,000, and then the insurance costs on the building itself go up. But yeah, so it's very significant.
I don't have it in front of me either, but we're talking very large tax increase just for the fire hall itself, and then on top of these numbers. Thanks.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your report. It's very sobering. I was wondering if you could go back to your slide on the policing costs over 5 years. So the drawdown slide. Yeah, I was just wondering if you could explain this slowly, because I'm not sure if everybody got this in terms of what we had in reserves, why you're doing this option in terms of phasing it out over 5 years. If you could just go through that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Through chair, absolutely. So right now we've got $1.25 million sitting in our police reserve, and then based on the expectation that we want a pretty smooth tax increase rather than one big spike or two big spikes over the next 5 years, we've drawn down this amount based on the estimated costs that the RCMP are going to be having over the next 5 years. So because of the significant increase in contract costs for 2026, we end up using $400,000 in 2026, while also seeing a police tax increase of 13%. So that's the police tax itself is not equal to, like, it's not 13 times that $14.43. It's more of a like 13% 13 times $2.50. It's not as bad as the 14 number, but still not good when you compound it over 5 years. So every year, so 404,000, then we'll draw down 330,000, resulting in an almost even 13%. We need 14 in 2028, again, because the PILT disappears from Merritt Hill, and they are contributing to the police costs. So we have to do a slight bump up in that year, and then 2029 and 2030. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, thanks. And recent figures that I heard from the West Shore RCMP that one police officer is equivalent to about $220,000, and those they expect those to increase because of the collective bargaining and also the increase in all the armor and the hardware that they have to use to protect themselves. So we've got 5 police officers assigned to Metchosin. So you can, I'm just trying to give not only people at the table, but also the public those figures in terms of when I talk about the policing costs at $1.1 to $1.2 million per year. That's where that comes from. And I understand that those policing costs will go up by 100,000 for next year to 1.3 million a year.
Future? Correct. Yeah. So as you said, the officers themselves, 220,000. You could even add probably 3-4% on that just for next year. On top of that, we have to pay for the civilian staffing over West Shore. So that comes in at about 135,000. And then we've got this accommodation cost that's new for 2025. Will be there for 2026. So you're looking at another $80,000 there for next year. And there's police guard costs on top of that for another 10,000. And then again, Econ 911, here's 150,000. And then the Prime Corps break off from Econ, which was another one. Thankfully, only about $2,000, but it adds up quite quickly for a cost.
And through the chair, just to recap, so we have the $220,000 per police officer. Then we have the administrative, the civilian staff, the support staff that is at West Shore Police Department, RCMP. And then the accommodation is what the rent on the building, where that's partial rent because we're not owners, as is Langford, Colwood, and View Royal. Yeah, and then the police dog and the other costs, Ecom 911, 153,000. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gray.
Through the chair, just following on Mayor Little's discussion with the policing costs, the accommodation cost, is that the figure that will in future absorb the cost of the new building in Langford for the police force? Or will there be a subsequent charge on top of that? Or perhaps the discussions haven't gone that far yet?
Through the chair, I don't know. You can hope that it is included in that, but I would imagine that there will be an additional cost from them building that new building now that we're responsible for the accommodation cost. But maybe the mayor has more.
I meant it would be included in that cost when the building's built. That's probably in there.
Sorry, yeah, through the chair. Yeah, that 135 would just escalate based on their building.
Thank you.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, so the accommodation cost is another way of saying the rent that we pay for that building. Definitely the rent that we pay for the space, I don't know what it is, 7% of the total building. I have no idea what that is, but for sure that rent will be increasing every year. But we are not owners of the building.
Councillor Gray.
And just to follow up then on the policing question, the earlier there, and I just wonder if I got it right, the for 2026, the document says estimated increase of 2026 is 38%, $308,000. But I think the slide said $208,000. Is that a typo, or are those two different numbers?
Through jerk, that 38% was a typo. I had originally, when I was putting in the budget, was 380, and then when I looked back to what we had actually budgeted for in the 25 through 29, it dropped down.
So it should be $208,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Rupp, did you have any comments or input on the budget thus far? No? Anybody else? Councillor Shukin?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I do have a question or two, but I have some things that I was hoping to put to this table and to Mr. Creek for consideration of budget items to be considered in the budget as we move along here. So, Mr. Creek, I wonder if you could go back to the table where you look at just a breakdown of general admin, protective services, fire departments, or sorry, planning department. And I wonder if you could walk us through the last three lines: amortization, transfer from reserves, transfer to reserves. Just and one thing that catches my eye is the expected transfer to reserve of 42,000. It's quite a bit higher in 2026, and I suspect that's because you're planning for the building up our reserves for infrastructure replacement. But please.
Yeah, through the chair. So this is the gigantic jump between 25 and 26 is basically the change from the budget software that was being used previously to now. So there was never really an actual budgeted amount for transfers to reserve related to amortization. And so that's where the majority of that comes from, because that amortization amount of 1.3 million is inside that 1.9 million. And then on top of that, so we've got the West Shore Parks and Rec. So we transfer $150,000 a year into the reserve for West Shore's future potential capital expansions. And then also picking up the gas tax, which is $300,000 a year, and then a few other items. So now it's like the budget just ends up showing what we're budgeting for transfers to reserves, rather than just relying on over budgeting on expenses and under budgeting on revenue to have a surplus at the end of the year that you end up transferring into reserve. Now we're actually saying we're going to budget for all these transfers, so we know how much is going in, so we know how much we're taxing. We can get a better plan going into the future for asset management.
And did you want to explore your other questions right now?
I do want to throw out several ideas and in terms of projects that I believe are important to plan for in 2026, and there will be some budget allocations or budget considerations with these. So one of the things that I'm hoping to bring to council, or council will see in the next few months, is a plan to move ahead with the bufferland in terms of a rezoning or some sort of conservation designation, covenant, or like I say, a rezoning. Now, if we move ahead with that, we need to also begin to, almost do the boots on the ground thing in terms of planning for a park, planning for access management, which again, it's that can have a whole bunch of meanings, but and also understanding, what natural, what do you want to call them, environmental features and ecological features that we need to protect on the bufferland. So one of the things I do have to say around all of this is we've been talking about the bufferland for a number of years now, and what we've heard again and again is Metchosin, don't consider selling the bufferland. It's a public property. Let's treat it as parkland and let's care for it. And so that is going to come with some cost. What I would like to propose is that we allocate at least $25,000 in 2026 for the development of some sort of access management plan, and even the beginnings of putting infrastructure in the park itself. I think that's a modest amount, but it is the beginning of seriously calling the bufferland ours and putting our footprint in there. So one of the things we could do, we've drawn these amounts from reserves in the past, and we can pull or manage our allocations from that. We may not need the money in 2026, but it would be good to have it available. The other thing I would like to propose is that we look at increasing our grant in aid program. Now, what I understand Mr. Creek is going to do is he's going to allocate us the money that we have committed to the 7 nonprofit groups to relieve them of their municipal tax, and that right now is projected to be $97,750. But I would like to propose that we add another $20,000 to that amount to allow to increase our support to local groups, such as we may have missed or not been able to accommodate with the decision on the PTE, permissive tax exemption. Now, $20,000, we've been allocating $5,000 regularly, and we've been doing our grant and aid program with a focus on regional groups. I would propose increasing that by $15,000. And finally, well, there's 2 other things actually, sorry. The Parks and Trails Master Plan is underway. We asked at the beginning of the year for an allocation of $20,000. I would like to continue that into 2026. I can inform you that the spending to date has been, if I can think, I believe it is $79 for cookies at the open house. So we have not spent a lot of money, but as we move into the phase where we're going to do mapping and ideally get a graphic designer, that money might come into, money might be important to completing the project. But for right now, this is an effort that has been done entirely by volunteers and has cost, like I said, $79. Finally, I think this council has decided and actually caught the community vibe that we do need to make progress on the fire hall. One way or another, we need to take steps to move on the fire hall. We have decided to move ahead with an option that will see a full rebuild. I think it's pretty clear that we need to wait and see what the outcome of the grant is before moving ahead. But in doing that, and we've heard, you know, in our meetings with the CRD during the UBCM convention, that we're expecting to maybe not hear until August. So there is an opportunity to continue to enhance and do some scoping, deeper scoping on option 1A, but also explore other options as well. But one of the things I think we need to consider in terms of funding is looking at a project manager. Now, whether this is a full-time project manager or someone who comes on gradually, but I believe that allocating budget for this will actually end up in a more effective process and actually cost savings on the long term as well. The question I would have is, and we heard from one of our residents a few weeks ago, how important it is to have somebody that has full-time dedication and can help you through the processes of all the arcane processes, which I'm not even sure, but getting, again, understanding what the best building materials are, understanding what the process is for getting tender documents, understanding what the general market is out there. So again, all of that should be done probably by a professional project manager. And again, if we got the right person, I think we would see long-term savings in the process. So what that amount is, I'm not sure, but I believe that would be prudent for us if we are moving ahead with some iteration of the fire hall to budget for that position. Okay, so just in summary, I would request allocations for bufferland planning, project manager for the fire hall, an increase in grant and aid, and a continuation of the funding allocation for the Parks and Trails Master Plan, and we'll do our best to minimize costs, but go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Free, in regards to the bufferland, every year we receive income from the industrial park of 7%. Those funds, do they still go into general revenue, or do we put them into a bufferland reserve, which we have discussed? I don't know if we ever formalized that, but is that something that income could actually be directed to something like the buffer land?
Through the chair, certainly. So yeah, we do not have a specific buffer land reserve set up,
Okay.
but we could definitely develop one here for 2025. Throw in the money that we received from the property tax on that industrial land, and start throwing it in there. I think we received $17,000 this year from Langford. So
okay.
We start. It's I think that was up like $4,000 this year compared to last. So
right.
Things have certainly started to roll over there.
Okay. And the other query I have is the grant and aid, as we know it, for the broader community, which is not just within Metchosin, but services that we use inside and outside of Metchosin, has for a number of years been $5,000. And at the beginning of this term, we had it at 10,000. We rolled it back because we didn't know what our policing was cost going to be, and a number of other factors in those early stages of the budget. And now we're referencing grant and aid for the PTE. I guess my question is, should we maybe consider the PTE as a grant of itself and not to be mixed up to a grant and aid, if this is how we're going to go in the future?
Through the chair, yeah, we could set up a separate account just for grant and aid exemptions, and then leave the original 5,000. It's actually bumped up to 6 to cover that youth parliament in 2025 and 2026. But certainly we do that going forward.
Okay, and maybe it just has its own name, PT grant or something. I don't know. It's just because it's a fairly new suggestion to just not get too mixed up. I think we've got lots of confusion on some things. And Councillor Shukin, you had mentioned 20,000 for the master plan that hasn't really been used. So are you asking 20,000 for every year, or just for the year? Or are we just moving this forward, the 20,000 from the previous?
It's essentially moving it forward. Yeah.
Okay, for 2026 only. Okay. Okay. Any other questions, Councillor F?
Yeah, just to say that I would like to see the grants increase because these groups that have been affected by the permissive tax exemptions have really not had an opportunity to prepare for this. So I would like to see more than 20,000 actually put in the budget this year to help to counteract that exemption rules. So, and then possibly revisit it again next year to just so they have a little more cushion before things really change.
Any other comments, committee? Councillor Gray?
I had some questions. I don't know if we plan on going through the document. The first question I had was, I see, and you mentioned through the chair, Mr. Creek, the idea of adding $8,500 per year to cover council members' health benefits, and you said there was some discussion about that. Where did that originate?
Through the chair, the CAO had brought it up to me, and so that 8,500 was based on the EFAP program and then UBCM group benefits. So it'd be health and dental coverage.
So my perspective on that is that it would be unusual for a council to vote to give itself an increase in pay, and there was some recent experience in Victoria that went rather poorly, I think, and so they backed away from it with the idea that they would vote for an increase for a future council. But beyond that, it seems unconscionable at the moment for a council here to be looking at this kind of increase for ourselves at a time when we've just reduced our financial support to community groups and volunteers. So I'm not in favor of this item continuing on the agenda.
Mayor Little?
Be interested in the views of others around the table.
Any other comments, committee, on that particular topic? Councillor Shukin, your light is on.
Yeah, I'm. What's interesting to me I'm fine with the 8,000 toward council benefits. One thing I have to point out to everyone in the room, everyone who's listening, is if you were to hire a person for a position, like a basic, like, I don't know, unskilled labor position, you're probably looking at total compensation in the order of $80,000 to $90,000. Again, wages and benefits. One thing to point out to everyone is that I think I'm looking at an old plan here, but the total compensation for all of mayor and council is $110,000. So that's all 5 of us. And whether we're working full-time, I am betting that the mayor actually works full-time plus, or volunteering for all the things that we do. That's a bargain. $110,000 for 5 people. So, you know, I think if there's a possibility of getting benefits and it'd be $8,000, I think that's fine. So,
Mayor Little.
Yeah, I've been talking to a number of potential candidates for the 2026 election, particularly young women. Most of them say absolutely not, but some of them say, you know, what kind of benefits do they have, like for my kids' braces? And then I've also asked other councils and council members from the CRD what they provide. In Langford, for instance, of course, their wages are higher there, or their stipend is higher. But the key for at least 3 of them was that they provided health benefits. And I think that they would not have put their name forward for that position, which would account for a reduce in their pay from their job that they left, without that added benefit for themselves and their children. And so for that reason, I think it's a good idea, not only for, I'm sure there's people around this table that could well use the health benefits, but also for future generations, because what we don't want and what it looks like we're moving towards is people that can have the ability to put their name forward are already financially sound. And so we're isolating a demographic, and what we're supposed to do is elect people which represent people from the broader community. So people with low incomes, high incomes, all along. And so the health benefits, I think, is a little bit of an equalizer, and it would help. Would you consider that a jump in the pay? I don't think that's a jump in the stipend. It's adding one benefit. There's no other benefits that council receives. Other councils, there is pension and lots of other benefits in their package, but there's no benefits with the council position in the district of Metchosin.
So, Mr. Creek, this particular topic would apply starting 2026, or would this apply to after the election?
Through the chair. So currently it's sitting in the 2026 budget, so it would start January 1st, 2026. If you wanted to bump it in for the next council, so you're not giving it to yourselves, you just put it into 2027 if you want.
Thank you. Okay. Mayor Little.
If I could go back and ask through the chair to Councillor Schuppen, just on the plan to move forward regarding the buffer lands. I would speak in favor of a motion to put some money towards that, and to put covenants on that, because this council has clearly stated, and the buffer lands working group clearly stated that they wanted this to be a conservation area, to be treated like a conservation park. And so in order to move forward on that, we would need to have a plan, as you mentioned, but also signage such as this is a conservation area, please stay on the path or something like that. Plus also, I understand there are groups that would help with the covenants, like Habitat Acquisition Trust and Metchosin Foundation. There are others, but those covenants do cost money, and I think it's a good idea. If we were to rezone it to a novel conservation area, to not only rezone it, but also to slap 2 covenants on the property so that in perpetuity, for as long as we live, that it wouldn't be developed. And then, so if I could get you to comment on that, and then I'll go on my questions, if that's okay.
That's good, thanks.
Yeah. So the plan is to have a report brought to council in December that will lay out the options, of which I believe a covenant is going to be one of them, and rezoning is going to be one of them, and whether they work together and how they do that is going to be covered in the report. And what, of course, is interesting, if we decided to, any of the steps ahead are probably going to be months long. So I'd actually been hoping we would have had it in October. Just doesn't work out that way. But December, and maybe we can get to work in January. The one thing I will say again is we have been talking about the buffer land for years. No one, sorry, maybe there's been a few, but very few people are saying sell it, get rid of it. So I think that there is consensus in the community that we do need to do something in the order of how Metchosin owns and runs it and protects it. So thank you.
Okay, and through the chair to CFO Creek. I can't remember the criteria, but I know the criteria was very broad. Could we not use some of the growing community funds that we have? I think it's at $2.45 million now, or 2.35, somewhere around there. We've got quite a bit of money in there for projects, and I know that feasibility studies was eligible. It was a very broad category for the Growing Communities Fund.
Through the chair, you're correct. So you could certainly use that for developing parkland within the district of Metchosin. I think they gave 2.3, so like we're closer to 2.6, 2.8 now after the interest accumulating over the last couple of years.
Okay, and is my assumption that because they allowed feasibility studies, they would probably allow asset management plans? Just a guess?
Through chair, 100%. Province loves asset management.
Councillor Gray.
I think the Growing Community Fund is part of the calculations to reduce the debt on the new fire hall. So if you moved it over to the bufferland, it would be like going into debt for the bufferland covenants and rezoning. But I'm wondering, just in terms of what Councillor Schuken's described to us, this budget process was going to go on for a while, so it seems to me it's a little bit early to be passing motions and setting dollar figures around the bufferland. We'll have a report in December, get a look at that, and find out what the best option is. Is it a zoning? Is it a covenant? What is it? And find out what kind of dollars are involved.
Mayor Little, go ahead. Your mic, please. It's okay.
Yeah, the Growing Communities Fund hasn't been allocated. We've certainly talked about it. As far as I know, we haven't passed any motions that it was going to be going exclusively to the fire hall. Certainly the talk was that we were going to use a vast majority of it for the fire hall. And I appreciate Councillor Schuken coming forward with ideas. I didn't see him motivate on a motion. He said, suggesting, I mean, we're starting in our granting process, and even you'll notice in our pinks, there's 2 individuals that are talking about requests for the tennis court. So you're in keeping with the community that is also throwing out ideas at the beginning of our granting process, and I appreciate that.
Councillor Gray.
So on the first page, I had a question for Mr. Creek, which was the describing in general administration there's the note about full fiscal impact of revised wages will appear in the 2026 budget, and the figure is $73,000. And up on the slide, it looked like the $73,000 was both for revised wages and the QP negotiation result. Is it just part of that? Are we expecting additional dollars for those two items?
Through the chair. So that 73 is the wage adjustment that occurred this year, and then an estimate for what the QP negotiation would be. So I had put that into the 2025 as a guess. I was really hoping to have an answer by now. Hopefully have an answer before the end of the year. Give you a final figure on
Yeah,
what
that's great. Thank you. And then dropping down, I guess the bylaw question, you said the CRD is going to increase that. Is that because we have higher volume or they're changing the rate?
Through the chair. They are just changing the rate. It's just apparently it's been something they hadn't looked at in roughly a decade. So now they're saying, hey, we're paying our guys a lot more. We gotta charge the people who are using them. So
Under the planning department, I was surprised that the budget figure for 2026 is quite close to 2025. And so I may not have it right here. I was thinking that our planner was now fully occupied, both the regular planning duties, but also with the housing work that's being done. And the housing part was funded through a grant from the province for specifically to get that housing work done. And then I thought that grant would then fall away, and so the planner would then be on, back to the, I'll call it the regular time for the planner for the district. But the dollars don't suggest that. Might you help me understand that? Is the planner returning to kind of the regular planner for the district at the end of the year and into 2026, or is there something else going on?
through the chair. Yeah, so as far as I know, it's going to be based on that back to the 1 day a week work. The reason there's not a big change is because the budget allocation for that housing initiative didn't show up right in that department. It was more of a special project. I didn't pull it in, so it's just there isn't another $150,000 project sitting in planning for 2026.
So the number stays the same in the budget here, but somewhere else it's been removed. Thank you.
Is that all right now, Councillor Gray?
Well, I'm happy to go through the document if that's what we're going to do next.
Mayor Lily, you had a comment?
I was just wondering if you could go back to your slide when you talked about the planning and what is coming next after the housing needs. You had a horizontal graph. Yeah, and so there's no major change, but we'll have to plan for what is coming up. We still have provincial obligations in the future regarding the housing needs.
Through the chair, I would rely on you and CAO for that information on what exactly needs to take place after that housing needs report. The 2028 one is just based on we get the new census data in 2027, so then they want the new report by the end of 2028. So there could be some more work starting in 2027. I'm just currently don't know when they plan to actually hit the ground running on that project. So I just put it in 2028.
Did you have some information on that, Mayor Lily?
No, I just know that there'll be some cleanup work, but I don't know how much. I haven't talked to the planner or the CAO about this, but I know there'll be some cleanup work, but there'll be some work that'll need to be done to plan for the next census. And so there is some indications that our population has gone, unfortunately, beyond the 5,067 with the BC statistics, and so we'll need to plan for, get ahead of that and plan for that and make sure we keep that in mind in our budgets.
Councillor Gray?
So to that point, the $25,000 at the bottom of page 5, very bottom, would be in the year 2028, or that's where you've put that, I imagine, for the housing projects?
Through the chair, correct. Yeah.
Thank you. If I could ask through the chair, the top of page 6, there's a notion there of increasing the invasive plant species expenditures by $25,000 or $2,500 per year. And I wonder why that would be.
Through the chair, so our public works department has taken on some additional training in order to deal with noxious weeds like black knap and silver something. Sorry. And so they requested additional funding, and the way this budget program was set up, it's like all the invasive species fall under planning. So it's just sitting there along with the bullfrog and the bunny stuff.
So, Mr. Gay, you may not have the number, and that's fine, but I think when we had the CRD doing this work, the charges are more like $1,000 a year. And maybe we can just check that later, but it would be nice to compare if doing it ourselves is costing us an additional $1,500 per year. That may not be the best use of our tax dollars. We don't need to debate right now, but if we can find out, that'd be great to find out.
I will look into that.
So we look forward to maybe some information coming back then. And another question?
And I, just looking at the school, the paragraphs on the school, and thanks for that. By the way, thanks for all of this work. This is a huge amount of effort gone into this and laying it out, and much appreciated, Mr. Creek. On the school side, I guess I would appreciate getting a look kind of like we saw there at the police. What do we expect is going to happen in these years and the out years? That would be a big help. Immediately when I read this, I thought, well, we'll wait a minute. What are the total costs per year, and what's the future trend? Where do we see that going? In terms of the revenues and our expenditures. We're spending a bit of money now on the school every year just to keep it running. But we've heard from MACA, I was in touch with what day it is today, but maybe that was on Monday. The siding is giving way, and they've kind of temporized there. And some of the things, I know we had a septic field work to be done. And there was mention of roof work needed to be done. Now, maybe some of those are capital and not operating, but just to understand maybe the capital and operating, where we think we might be with the school would be a help. And I do see the notes on the other page, Parks and Rec Culture, and I presume it's in there somewhere. But just to understand those charges would help us see where we are there and where we might be in terms of both revenue and expenditures.
Through the chair. So yeah, we'll be talking about the capital projects coming up in the end of November here, and so that'll kind of lay out that septic tank that is going to be replaced, because we're saving money away for that right now, and I believe that's in 2029. I believe is when that finally comes due. But like I say, that with the new tenant coming in, they're going to start paying for an allocation of the operating expenses for the school. So it's like that revenue is going to come up to help offset those costs a little bit more. And that's what we've discussed with MACA, right? Is the operating cost for their square footage. Like, we're just kind of like to treat them just like any other tenant in the school, where Mile Zero is paying for their portion of the operating cost based on their square footage. And so will the new tenant. We just want to make sure that we're recovering and reduce the subsidy that the taxpayers are currently providing for the school as a whole.
Thank you for that, Mr. Creek. I appreciate that. Hearing that it's fair and equitable. We're aiming for that. Does anyone else at the committee have a comment on the planning, the school, or public works so far? Councillor F, and then Councillor Shaw. Thank you.
Just regarding MACA, I think that there is needs to be a value or cost attributed to the work that they have done there as far as the renovations or what they do in the school, rather than just looking straight at. I know they haven't kept close documentation of all the hours that they have done strictly in maintenance and improvements as far as upgrading bathrooms and rooms and floors and things like that. So I just think that needs to be kept in mind when negotiating the lease, and not just look upon that as just not really having no value.
And Councillor Shukin?
I have a general question, maybe suited to the end, if you don't mind
Okay.
remembering that I have a question, because I may not. So.
Okay, I'll try. And Mayor Little?
I was just going to make a comment regarding the invasive species, and I thought that came through the Environment Committee in terms of the black knotweed and the suggestion that we move to having it done in-house. Did that come from your committee?
No, in fact, in the discussions, that was something that our CEO initiated on his own, and some of the confusion arose after that. If we do that, wouldn't one of the questions at the time was, wouldn't that increase our cost? And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I just would like to get some clarity if that makes sense or not.
Yeah,
we thought if the CEO made the decision, we'd like to support him in that. But then as the discussions carried on, it became uncertain whether that was the best way to organize things.
Well, through the chair, that is certainly operational. That's in his purview, but I'll have to go back to the minutes and see where that originated from. But I do know that the CRD provided good service, but it was expensive, and I think, yeah, I'll have to reserve my comments until I look back at the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're past Public Works. Fire is the next topic. Councillor Gray, you want to start us off?
Yeah. I mean, maybe I would just say something generally, which is, holy crow, it looks like we've got some really big financial issues to deal with. I mean, that we're here in the little asking about these small questions, but the big picture, Mr. Creek, that you provided is pretty clear. We've got some tough slogging ahead in terms of figuring things out. And so while we're focusing on some smaller questions just to get clarity today, I expect as we go through the budget, it'll get clearer and clearer the magnitude of the issues that we're dealing with. I didn't want to suggest that these little questions meant anything compared to the bigger one. On the fire hall, I just wanted to get clear. I'm very pleased to hear that we're proceeding with dealing with the roof repair, the air quality improvements, which are really important for our firefighters, the gear storage, again, very important, the washroom facilities and the minor renovations. So I want to congratulate the CEO on moving forward on those issues. Is the $16,000 noted under the fire section? Is that $16,000 a year? And will we get those things done now, or is it kind of an idea of we're going to spend $16,000 a year over a number of years to get those things done? I'm just not clear about that.
Through the chair. So there's a bunch of work being done this year, and so we didn't budget for that originally in the 2025 plan. So we're relying on surplus, and if there's not enough surplus, then reserve to pay for the projects that are happening this year. That 16, I budgeted for that every year going forward based on continued remediation of a building that is 70, 50 years old in certain parts. Whether or not that's actually spent, can't guarantee. I don't know. Hopefully, most of these problems are going to be remediated within the next year. But in case anything else kind of starts falling apart before there's a final renovation made or rebuild.
Thank you. That's really clear.
Mayor Dillon.
Yeah, on that note, I think the 16,000 is for maintenance and repairs right now. The other safety concerns that were noted by the fire chief, the air quality, I think there was quite a cost to that. And since we have, too bad. She's our acting CAO, so she's doing other things right now. Unfortunately, the fire chief's left the building, so perhaps we can ask her about those estimated costs for the decontamination and the air exchange. They definitely wouldn't amount to 16. It would be greater than that. Am I correct in my assumptions?
Through the chair, yeah, the air quality one, I've heard some very high numbers than the 16,000 won't cover. I'll just say that 16,000 is added to the current 5,000 that's in the budget. So originally it was just 5,000 budgeted for repairs and maintenance. Clearly has not been enough for what's going on with that because of the age of the building. So I just bumped that up to 21,000 to say, here's some more. Hopefully this can kind of hold you over until something happens.
Yeah, the exhaust extraction system, we're talking $250,000. I remember this from a previous conversation, so estimated.
Yeah, and through the chair, I also have another question or a comment actually, that the repairs that everybody saw on the roof in the last little while, of course, the district is reticent to put money into that building, but we're at a phase where we have got Band-Aids on Band-Aids, and so they've done a great job for the money that we had, so that at least water is not pouring into the fire hall. I mean, it goes back to if the fire hall had been replaced in 1987, we wouldn't be dealing with this, but we have to deal with it, but we're not going fancy with the repairs. They really are Band-Aids.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to policing. Any comments from the committee on policing for Mr. Creek? I think it was a pretty robust report, actually. Not sure what to add, but some questions for sure.
Yeah. Through the chair, we had written and done a lot of advocacy regarding Ecom 911. There is some talk that or perhaps some requests coming forward at the CRD board, that the CRD board start advocating for that levy that Councillor Shukin has been talking about, the cell phone levy. So that's good news if it happens. I'll let you know more about that later. That would decrease our costs. But we haven't really talked a lot about the VIMQ because we really didn't have a figure. We attended a conference, CAO Payette and I, where it was floated that there was going to be an increase in costs, and then we heard what they were going to be, and they were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and all of us, sent in our shock and awe, and now the 37,000 here, is that an estimate or a guesstimate or information from the underground?
Through chair, that is a lowball guesstimate, I would say. It's like that. From a conversation I had with the CAO probably over a year ago now, and so it's like, again, I haven't heard anything. It's kind of mentioned when the inspector or sergeant was here. I think Councillor Shukin mentioned it to him, and then didn't get a clear answer on what that cost was going to be. So I'm really hopeful that the other CFOs have heard some kind of better guesstimate as to what this is going to run coming forward, and I'll bring that to you as soon as I can, because I would like to get that number finalized, because the rest of them are pretty solid.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, Mayor Little, you'll recall when we met with the ministry to talk about Ecom, there was going to be a review, I believe, of the levy and whether or not that will exist or not, or go more in our favor. But certainly 2 years ago at UBCM, I remember that coming up from the Ecom people. It would sure be more equitable across this province to have more people contributing rather than 10 municipalities on the lower South Island.
Yeah, through the chair, what we heard at the meeting was they were listening to us when we suggested why not levies on cell phone, but we really didn't get a response back. That was a good suggestion, a bad suggestion, or whatever. But what we heard at UBCM previously and what they committed to at that meeting was they are doing a review of their governance and the overall plan and how that's going to be unrolled. And in that will be a communication plan, so that they have committed to that. And it sounds like they're continuing to commit to that. But our pleas about the levy sort of fell on deaf ears. I think they know about it, but they didn't comment.
That's correct. Councillor Gray.
Under the policing section of the briefing note, through the chair, Mr. Creek, I wondered if you might explain to us the e-com numbers. I think you said $55,000 for 2026. I was under the impression, maybe that's the increased amount, but I think it was 130 or 150 or some larger number before. We used some reserve last year. I'm just wondering if you could comment on, we paid last year, or this year, 2025, we paid a certain amount from taxes, and we paid a certain amount from the police reserve. Do we have those numbers? If not, that's okay. We'll pick up later.
Through the chair. Yeah, so for 2025, because we only had to pay for 3/4 of the year, it came into 103,000. And now with the full year, and then also their inflationary cost of it, we're up to 155. So that's where you're saying, hey, there's an extra 55,000 on top of the original budget of 103. The amount that we pulled from reserve or budgeted for reserve, I'd have to get back to you on that one, because I know
That's great, thanks.
we didn't tax enough for it based on it.
Yeah, we used the reserve to soften or to smooth the increase, I think was the point last year.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can catch up tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to financial projections, and we have a chart in front of us. Any feedback or queries on this from Mr. Creek? This is page 7. Councillor Gray.
Sure. Just I guess it's the very bottom line, and Councillor Shukin asked about this already. Do those figures include what you were suggesting, a 1% increase for asset replacement?
Through chair, yes.
Yeah. And then the other day we were looking at that question, and it's a bit awkward one. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but I think the notes told us that there was an annual funding gap of $3 million. In other words, and we talked together that day, Mr. Creek, that's like 100% tax increase, to give to resolve that annual funding gap in terms of building reserves. And now the suggestion is we put 1% in. There's a big difference between 1% and 100%. And I wonder if you might comment on that. Thank you.
Through the chair. So yeah, you're correct with the $3 million deficit for asset management, and then that being 100%, that we collected just under $3 million in property taxes for residents this year. And so I kind of went at it saying, no chance anybody wants to get 100% tax increase in a year. Don't think that's feasible for anybody. But also the $3 million funding gap is based on like a 100-year asset management plan. So we have time to start building that up. So essentially in this 5-year plan, it's going to be 1% in 2026, and then additional 1% in 2027. So we're at 2%, and then additional percent in 2028. So we're at 3%, 4%, 5%, and we're just going to add 1% to that every single year until we get to the full number. Ideally, we can rely on some provincial grants somewhere in the future to help pay for any big projects. Maybe we'll get additional road funding, but it was the most feasible way to do this. If council is willing to do 2%, that would be great. 3% a year, even better. But I'm not going to push it because I think what's your name? Kathy pointed out like 30% tax increase since about 2022. And when you guys took office, unfortunately, at the same time as the RCMP came to town and said, pay us our money now. And your original budget was 600,000, right, in 2022. We've now paid over $1 million in 2025. Now we're projecting over $1.5 million by 2030. And so though just that cost is escalating so quickly, it's unfortunate. It's not the greatest. If you want to compare it to other municipalities, which is not, fair, it's hard to do, apples and oranges kind of deal. Even if you did increase taxes right now by 100%, you'd end up being the 6th highest taxing municipality out of the 13 in the CRD. So it's like there's people paying much more higher taxes. Granted, they have other amenities, but anyway, sorry, I lost track there.
That's great. I think I got the answer, which is 1% a year is just a start. Get us going to get us discuss that. We might decide a higher amount as well, knowing the gap is so large. But the impact of not having the money now is some years away. I think part of your point.
Through Joe. Yeah, it's barring some natural disaster or something really bad happening, we don't need an extra $3 million going into reserve next year to pay for anything. And we've got sufficient reserves for the asset management plan that we have now. Where it really comes to a head is if we need to replace this municipal office in 50 years, at the 75-year mark, we need to replace the EOC building. If it doesn't get lumped in with the new fire hall that's currently planned, and then just the constant repair of the trucks and the roads. I think I showed last year at the open house for the budget where the biggest cost to this district is public works. It's 40 cents of every dollar that we pull in goes to public works to maintain those roads. So that's where Ms. Shukin's idea of skinny roads or gravel roads. I came from Saskatchewan. There's gravel roads everywhere. Not the greatest to drive on, but it would certainly keep the speed down.
Councillor Epp and Councillor Shukin, do either of you have comments on the financial perception chart here? Councillor Shukin?
I'm going to ask my random question now, if I could, Councillor Donaldson. So I think it was Ms. Canning had made an allusion to the tax classes and industrial, commercial, residential, and we know we have very, very few in the tax class. But I would be really curious to know, I'd be really curious to know how many tax folios, I think you refer to them as, we have in the district, because I think there's been some misconception around all of that, and maybe what they contribute in terms of a percentage. I think that, and the reason I ask that is, I was in discussion with somebody at Metchosin Day, and they were convinced, we only have, I forget the number, 1,600 or 1,700 taxable properties, but I think it's more than that. And I wonder if it would be possible to get a breakdown, just so everyone's really clear. And again, I don't know how difficult this would be. Okay.
Through the chair, not hard at all. It's in the property tax calculator I use. Like the information we pull in from BC Assessment, when they give it, they break it down by each class. So the residential, single family, the residential farm, utility, business, light industrial, that type of thing. So we're at just over 2,200 folios. There's 1,900 single family residential homes in there, and we are down to 150 farm properties out of all that. And then, like I said, there's about a handful of light industrial from, I want to say, 60-something businesses in total. But that's certainly where some movement in those areas could generate a significant amount of money. The mill rates for business is almost 5 times the residential rate. The mill rate for light industrial is over 6 times the residential mill rate. So any kind of increase in those properties would certainly help pay for some of these costs, like the RCMP that are coming. sorry, through chair again. I can bring that detail to the next budget meeting on November 6th, and we'll show everybody where all the money's coming from.
Yeah, that's a good idea to have a visual for sure. Little bit less confusion. Okay, so shall we move on to the bottom of that page? Any questions on the projected revenue changes for the 5 years? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn the page. Interest? Questions? Interest really isn't within our control, I don't think.
Through chair.
Or, well,
yeah, not so much.
Inflation, all that stuff.
I can lock in some of the reserves for a longer period of time. I started doing that this year just because we don't need so much just sitting in a money market fund as it's been previously done. So we can lock in the higher rate for a longer period of time, especially when we know that the central bank is going to be slashing rates more and more. They've done it a few times this year. Looks like at least one more time this year, maybe twice. And so if we can maintain interest rates more than 3%, then we can exceed budget there and help with the surplus and add some more to reserve at the end of the day.
Okay, so pills, we've covered that as well. Any particular questions on that?
I think so. And if I may, Mr. Creek, I think you provided us a pill briefing note and not too long ago. Has anything changed there, or we can go back to that note just to figure out these numbers?
Through the chair, nope, nothing's really changed in regards to it. The only thing that's going to be popping up is again Mary Hill. Hopefully 2028. Not entirely sure exactly when it's going to happen. If that can get pushed off a little bit further, great. If not, we do have the tax stabilization reserve that we're going to use to buffer that drop in revenue for about 3 years, about $150,000 a year. And then if we would like to add some more at the end of this year, once we figure out what surplus we have, we'd certainly do that and try and maybe get 4 years out of it, maybe 5, depending on how long that PILT stays in federal hand.
Marilyn?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So when the property is transferred to the First Nations on the Mary Hill, we will no longer be getting the payments in lieu of taxes, the PILT. Now, the question that I've wondered, and I think you've answered before, but I've forgotten, well, the First Nations won't get those PILTs, right? Because it'll be in their treaty, that'll be in their treaty package, right?
Yeah, because they will technically own that land again there. So as far as I know, the federal government is not going to can pay them annually what would be the equivalent of $150,000, because I don't believe the First Nation has their own tax rate for their land. Could be mistaken on that.
And then the other question through the chair is, are there any other parcels of land, section 95, 25, 28, do we get PILTs for any of those right now? And will those cease when we actually hold title?
Through the chair, so right now the district does not receive any PILT from any, like the section 95, 98, and is it like 20?
25.
25?
Yeah.
So we won't receive anything from that, so when you take it over, no change in the revenue.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Yeah, does that land get transferred immediately when the treaty is signed? Or would there be further procedures?
Through the chair, I do not know. I've never gone through one of these before. So we'd certainly ask, perhaps the CAO has more experience with that. I could ask the other CFOs, see if anybody's dealt with something similar. I think Comox is actually going through something similar with the Comox First Nation recently, so I could give a call back to the old folks there and see what they know about it. But I can check for you.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. It's been great.
I think, as I recall, those three parcels, park parcels, are linked to the land swap. Councillor Shukin, you probably remember that as well.
Yeah, so the reconciliation agreement specifically mentions those three, and there's something, the language is more complicated than this, but I think on something like upon the completion of the treaty, the First Nation will cause these parcels to be transferred to Metchosin, something in that effect. So, yeah, the reconciliation agreement is really strong in terms of those parcels coming to Metchosin. So, and again, this is something that Beecher Bay is committed to, and yeah, we'll work with us on.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Mayor Little.
And we do know from the South Island Task Force, which was formerly known as the TTAC, we do know that we're ending the treaty process, so we're at the end, but still it will be at least a couple of years, they figure. So that PILT transfer won't be for imminently, but inevitably.
Okay, comments or thoughts on the user fees and charges? This is the fire service agreement with Beecher Bay, the permit licenses and school fees. Councillor Gray?
Yes, I wondered, through the chair, Mr. Creek, the agreement that we have with Beecher Bay, is that calculated by population or by use, or do you, maybe you may not be familiar with this one, but, and I wonder if it's, what its term is. When does that agreement end? When do we need to renew it? It's 1991, it's a long time back now.
So through the chair, yeah, there is no term limit on that agreement, but we just collect 10% of the fire department's operating costs from Beecher Bay. So what they've paid has increased every year as the fire department budget has increased, and that's where it could certainly be something to go back at. We could look into charging based on calls. I know in Comox, when we were dealing with the same thing with the Comox First Nation, it was based on the number of buildings on reserve land. So that could be something where you could change the in negotiations. You could come up with saying, okay, we prefer to charge you for the number of buildings because they're doing quite a bit of development over there. So maybe the 10% of operating costs doesn't really recover the actual cost to the fire department for servicing the First Nation, but something to look at.
Thank you. I wasn't necessarily suggesting open it up just to understand how it worked. So I'm happy with the response of is 10% of the operating cost, and there's no term limit. The other question I had in that section was in relation to the fees and charges bylaw for the school. And is that specifically gym rental, or is that something else? An additional $5,000 if we give a 10% increase on the fees and charges?
Through the chair. So that would just be based on, yeah, the gym rental, classroom rental, field rental of the equipment, yeah, that type of thing, yeah.
Okay, moving on to risks and assumptions. Mayor Little, sorry.
Before we did that, I think we had talked at this table about increasing the license, especially for the business license, and perhaps have a graded approach for like boat building compared to selling socks or different businesses, but they're very, very cheap at $35 a business license. And I think I would like to see those business licenses increase, but also a graded system for the type of business. Thank you.
It's a good question for which category of license. Because I think STVRs were another one that we spoke of compared to other communities, and a conversation I'd had with Mr. Creek as to what levels of administration are involved in those sorts of things as well. And some of these businesses will need annual fire inspections or a building inspection at different stages. So those are things that Mr. Creek could maybe help us, guide us through that. Okay, so risks and assumptions. We already talked about roads a little bit here. As we had addressed, one of the residents spoke about it earlier, not this morning, but 2 hours ago. When we first came into this term and not knowing what our policing was, one of the very first things we did is we rolled back on the paving budget. and it's not that far now into this term, in his third year, and we've got an incredible amount of downloading from the province and different agencies. And we did have an assessment done this past year on our roads. Our roads are in good working order. We did some crack sealing and patching. We do have a new schedule for the paving, but another thing to look at, we'll get more into the budget as to how we want to approach that this year, prioritizing, but not pushing things off so far, because that assessment clearly has brought us forward 25 years, beyond 25 years where it was before, and different use and traffic patterns and stuff. So something for us to be conscious of going forward, because that is significant amount of funding going into that one particular thing. Any other comments on this section? Mayor Little and then Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I just wanted to ask our CFO the information on the grant funding. When we had the ministerial meetings at UBCM only a few weeks ago, the common message and the overall umbrella message that I received was there's no money. There's no money for future grants. Although the UBCM grant that we applied for is secure because that money has already been allocated, there's no money for grants. They're trying to cut back on staff. They've got a hiring freeze, and even the UBCM infrastructure grant that we applied for, that there will not be an intake next year. And I think they said maybe there would be an intake in 2028 or 2029, which means if you applied in 2029, you wouldn't hear it until 2030. So I'm very glad that we applied for that grant for this year, because the money all across all of the ministers that I spoke to, and I spoke to others outside of our meetings at the breakfast series, and there's no money.
Through the chair.
Sorry, is that your feelings?
Yeah, through the chair. When we were at the UBCM convention there, the grant people certainly seemed quite skeptical of what was going to be happening in the future due to all the cuts. People were on strike at the same time, so all of these factors are really leading into what is going to be there in the future. Not for sure. Like the Community Works Fund, from formerly gas tax, so they have a 10-year agreement for that, so we should be firm on that through 2035. Are they going to reduce it? Possibly, right? They're receiving fewer and fewer gas tax every year as more people adopt EV vehicles until they come up with a replacement for it. And then, as with our discussions with that nurse practitioner for the school, she can't receive a grant from the province to even set up a health center, which is urgently needed pretty much across the province. And they're like, no money for it, figure it out yourself. So based on that, I'm quite interested to see where the federal government budget comes on November 4th. They've already started talking about there's going to be some suffering coming forward because there's just not enough money to meet their defense spending needs and then everything else that's going on. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of federal funding is available to the province.
Councillor Gray.
And I hear loud and clear that the grant monies will be declining or reduced in some way. I found my notes here, Mr. Creek, or your notes rather. The fire hall, presently the numbers that we had in terms of if we're successful with the $7 million grant, then it was 15% increase in taxes up to a 29% increase in taxes without going to a referendum. And if we added in the $690,688 of operating costs, that's a 23% tax increase. So proceeding with the fire hall would give us a 38% to 53% tax increase under the current scheme if we're completely successful. And when I look at the other costs that you're telling us about, I'm realizing we've got a bit of a crash coming here in terms of a tremendous pressure on our taxes.
Yeah, through chair. Yeah, there's a significant amount. When I was creating this draft, I'm like, 2031 is not a good year. Like everything comes to a head by then if Mary Hill is transferred in 2028 because we've run out of the tax stabilization reserve, we've used up all of the police reserve, and the costs are just going to continue to escalate. So it's where we're at, and unfortunately, it's costs that we really can't avoid. So we have to find a way.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, on that one, it has me driving for less expensive options on the fire hall and still meet the needs of our fire department and the community. I had a question under contracts. When we were discussing the fire hall and how to fund it, the increases, you provided us some little bit of information on that. And ideas came forward, for example, to cease our involvement, I guess, with the Greater Victoria Public Library, with West Shore Parks and Rec in order to fund the fire hall. And I wondered, I saw in the newspaper, Mayor Little, you came to the last meeting asking about, which way to vote on the CRD to support the arts. It was unanimous vote in favor. Thank you for that. But I guess I'm wondering, are those things on the table or are those theoretical questions for our budget this year? To me, they're theoretical, but I wondered if others are thinking about those issues more seriously.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a discussion. And so I don't know if you can ask people whether it's theoretical or not without us having a real discussion. For sure with the CRD arts, although the minutes do say that it was unanimous, I did say that I have grave concerns because adding another service, art service, transportation service, it always adds to the levies. The increase in the CRD arts means that they're going to be hiring more staff. When you hire more staff, every year you've got collective agreements, and it's going to be an enormous. But I did say at the CRD that I heard from my council that they were in favor of the new CRD arts service, even though I had reservations, so I voted in favor.
Mayor Little, recently, Mayor Kobayashi was interviewed on Czech TV, being the only person that actually voted against the APP. Is that the same thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah, actually, there was some mix-up whether it was actually unanimous or whether Mayor Kobayashi's vote was in the affirmative or the negative. Certainly, he had reservations that were similar to mine. And he was quoted as saying that this new CRD art service would show absolutely no benefit to Colwood, and so he was against it. I don't know about the actual vote. That's a matter for the staff to work out.
Thank you. Councillor App.
We had a meeting quite recently with Mayor Kobayashi and Goodmanson and Williams about, it was an arts meeting, and Mayor Kobayashi said that his concern that he did totally support having an arts facility in the Western communities, but his beef was with the CRD because he has quite a beef with basically the bureaucracy and the costs involved in the CRD. But he made it very clear at the meeting that he definitely supported the arts in the West Shore.
I asked the question simply because I think of our regional role, or our role within the region rather, and the relatively small amounts that we pay into those very important services, the library and West Shore Parks and Recs, and the CRD itself, of course. And we have all been engaged with the West Shore Parks and Rec recently on their master plan, their redevelopment plan, which will have significant cost impacts for all of the owners of the West Shore Parks and Rec. And so I think it is important that we talk about that, not today necessarily, but in the budget process of what our intentions are.
Yeah, I concur with that, but we have to have the numbers before us because they're not small costs. They're the West Shore Parks and Recreation levies and the library, all of that together is a lot of money. And I think it's worth a conversation here at the table. And it's not that we're against the arts or we're against libraries. Everybody can see from this report is that we have limited revenue, and we're going to have to unfortunately prioritize our priorities. We're going to have to figure out where we want to cut and what we're willing to give up and what we're not willing to give up. And that'll be a conversation around the table, but I think people need time with the numbers in front of them before they can come forward and give some thought to that. Even if we don't make a decision, just to comment on that, they need some time.
Yeah, a conversation would be healthy as well, understanding our contractual requirements or obligations, I should say, with the various organizations. Okay, so any other comments on that particular section? Okay, seeing none, we're at the budget summary. And any outstanding, Councillor Shukin, did we get to your last question? You're good. Okay, we got that one answered. Okay. Okay, so
Yes, I might just offer
yes.
that.
Okay.
Again, I think it would help us for the budget process, but also talking about the fire hall to get a sense, and it's in your summary there, I think, Mr. Creek, the notion of, avoid significant tax increases in the future. Maybe we need to see the worst case scenario here. What's it look like, marched out the years? Maybe it's harder to write a best case scenario, but to get some sense of the year over year, what the increases would be for taxes. And I, again, appreciate the report here today, but just thinking as we march forward, if you could work on that, that would be help. Thank you.
It's through the chair. So I guess the worst case scenario would that be having the $21 million fire hall in the budget?
I suppose it's an issue of having a couple of scenarios.
Is that the biggest thing right now? Like, other than that RCMP cost, like I can lay that out for the next 25 years based on a guess. But the massive jump just from the 2025 through 29 budget to the 25 through 30, right? It was like, here's an extra $200,000 of cost. So I can put a 5% inflation on it and show what that's going to be by 2050. And then I can extrapolate out our operating costs. It was kind of in that idea of that report, I think early this year or maybe the end of last year, where it showed, hey, we're going to need 3% tax increases here for forever, essentially. And then, so the only thing I drew is really changing and the unknown is that fire hall. So I can come up with the three scenarios of, here's a $5 million fire hall, the 15 million, and the 21, and then show the impact on that, and then lay that out for the 75 years of the expected life, and then add that up with everything else as an idea, if that sounds good.
Certainly, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, let's move on to opportunity for the public to have input. Thank you very much, Mr. Creek. Appreciate the full report here. Is there anyone in the gallery who would like to have some comment to the committee on what's been presented here this afternoon? Please feel free to step up to the mic, introduce yourself and the street on which you live. Thank you.
Sorry,
And
Mary Ann Dillon.
You can move the mic according to how.
Mary Ann Dillon, 4045 Saddleback Road. I just had a couple of real quick questions that you may or may not have the answer to now, but regarding policing, which that seems like it's our most significant expenditure going forward. I know that our population currently is about that 5,000 mark. So my question is, if in the future, if we're trending that our population goes down below that 5,000, is there an opportunity to have those costs go down like they were beforehand?
That is a question that's come up before, and I'll defer that to the Mayor, Mayor Little.
Yeah, thank you. And there's precedent setting for that. Duncan actually went above then they went below, and they went above. So when they went above, they adjusted just like we did to have to pay those costs. When they went below, it wasn't automatic that those were adjusted, but they eventually were adjusted to the lower level. And then they do go according to the population. We're right now at 5,067. The BC stats put us at 5,303 or something like that.
Yeah,
So that's the BC statistics. So unless you have 67 plus 300 friends you want to say go live in Langford, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to go below, but you never know. You never know where. I do get the sense when we were campaigning and going up and down driveways that we had a list of 2 people on the list, and sometimes there were 6 dwellings. And so there were more people at those properties, and by that I extrapolated, and I think we're at least at the 5,300 mark, but maybe not. We'll see what the census next year, when they do the census next year, that will tell us, but it will go, our policing costs will commensurate with the population.
Thank you. One other question that I just had about with our housing targets, and I know there are, a couple of subdivisions that are sort of underway, and I think we've got that 852 housing targets that we're supposed to be adding within 5 years, I believe. So have the additional tax revenues been incorporated into our taxation anticipated revenue stream, or is that something that
Mr. Creek can answer that?
Through the chair, I have not. So good call on that one. We can. I think there might be a couple of building permits out there right now for the Beckingham people. So I can talk to our building inspector, see what kind of values on there, and then I could throw those in and say, here's an extra, $20,000-$30,000, whatever it might be.
And on that, with secondary houses and things, made me think about, if we do have a plan to sort of identify secondary accommodations or allow people to build additional accommodations, just recognizing and sort of incorporating that revenue potential for somebody to have a higher, incentive as far as the tax base and the revenue potential of what that might mean for additional.
And just to add to an earlier question there about the census number, both West Shore Parks and Rec and the Great Victoria Public Library based their budgets not on census but on the BC stats number, which is quite a lot higher. And the 852 dwellings is over 20 years.
Oh,
expectation, yeah, on the provincial calculator that was presented to us. Thank you. Councillor Epp and then Councillor Gray.
Yeah, with that number too, it doesn't mean that we have to add 800 plus houses. It just means we have to have the capability of being able to add it. So it's not a requirement. And yeah, that formula did come from the province, so it's probably not even very realistic for Metchosin.
Okay. Anyone else from the community that would like to speak?
Sherry Rourke, 5600 Rocky Point Road. Great reports, and I think this council has really challenging decisions ahead of them. For me, listening to the report and everybody speak, I think what's clearly evident is over the past decade, we've had less than 1% growth, and every year the expenses on this community are much, much more than that. And a lot of the expenses you've just gone over are obligations, right? They're not discretionary, and how that's going to impact us. Through the chair, I'm hoping that maybe some other answers we can get through the CFO is what are other communities' property taxes compared to Metchosin's. You know, somebody in, or we can just go to average taxpayers. So what is the average taxpayer paying in surrounding communities? I, you know, had asked around and I heard between 9,500 and 11,000 for similar values to my house. And so when I look at what our tax rate is versus that, it is extremely different. You know, so I just think actually having an official acknowledgement of that might help us understand as Metchosin residents where we sort of sit. I'd sort of like to know what happens more after 2031 once we've depleted all of the reserves. And I think Councillor Gray kind of went towards that question too. What are we looking at in the future? And are we putting an adequate amount into infrastructure replacement? Because right now we have not planned accordingly to replace or renovate a fire hall. So is 1% enough for when this building needs to replace? The community house, public works building, the money that, you know, eventually needs to go into the school. The buffer land, there was an article in the last week, another community was looking at something similar, and they're looking at a restricted use on that property to lower their costs. So instead of parkland, they were, I can't remember the term and I can't remember the article, and I wish I would have saved it, because they were looking at restricting access so that it's a wildlife, I don't want to say corridor, because I don't think that's the term that they use. But I'm just wondering, as we're acquiring more properties, that's another cost that comes on the district, and maybe it shouldn't be parkland, maybe it should be restricted to allow wildlife to thrive instead of giving people, you know, more access, which increase our costs as residents. While we have, obviously it's been discussed before, everybody around us comes to Metchosin to recreate. So as we see more people in surrounding communities and we develop our parkland, we're increasing our costs with no increase in taxation revenue. I think that sums it up. Thank you.
The buffer land, just in regards to what you're saying there, the working group actually worked a solid six months, I think it was, and put together a very thorough report as to the limitations of human activity and the various ways we could accomplish that. Ecological reserve was one of them. And there's an post-secondary educational component that can be tied in with that. But as the mayor said, with covenants and various ways of securing and rezoning, that report is worth a read. It was very,
I remember
very
reading
well
it, but it was that article, I just saw that, and listening to you guys tonight talk about it, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, we had addressed that for sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Your mic is not on, Mr. Lamb.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, no, you can.
Yes.
There's a number of existing and pending matters that are on the table that council needs to address. The unfortunate part is if they're not properly assessed and managed, we could find ourselves in dire straits. So again, I just caution council to be very, very diligent and cautious in all of the matters that they have to assess. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, Mayor Lynn?
Yeah, if I can make a comment regarding Ms. Work's comments. If council remembers correctly, in the first year, I was pitching the idea of having an economic development or economic sustainability committee to talk about exactly that question. What do we do in the future? And in response to Councillor Gray saying, what do we do in 2031? That's what I was talking about. But I do remember I received a rather muted response from Councillor Gray, perhaps others, that wasn't really needed. But I do think we really need to talk about that question about economic sustainability, not necessarily for this year or next year, but in a decade and in 25 years, because we all want to maintain Metchosin as rural. How are we going to do that? That was what I was driving at, and it's not too late to start those conversations and have free flow of discussions also with the public, because this report that we received today is quite stark. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray?
Yeah, through the chair, just to respond, I think the issue for me at the time, at the beginning of our mandate, was we had to find out what we're doing and get our sea legs here and understand the circumstance. And some of these discussions, it seems to me, should be at our table here. And I'm looking forward to them as we progress forward as the council.
Okay. So the next part of the agenda is the correspondence. On page 13, we have a letter from Mr. Joseph Gilbert regarding the tennis court, as well as a second letter from Mr. Brian Graham to do with the tennis court. Interesting enough, when Mr. Gilbert had reached out to me about the tennis court, I had actually had I've been looking at this for quite some time because it's right next to the community garden, which is a project I've been working on with a group of citizens. And there is a contact information, actually. It's a Gmail account. Didn't know if it was active, but so I emailed the person, which was Mr. Graham, and met with him yesterday to have a look around, and both these gentlemen had expressed the same concerns. There's a lot of drop-in use of the facility. It is probably a valuable asset. Well, I suspect it is a valuable asset. However, it's deteriorated greatly, and to a point of liability. And in a very brief conversation several months back with the CAO, we concluded that as well. And so there's different things we could do with that. We could, and this isn't the first time this has come up. It came up in the Healthy Communities Committee when I was on it, and Councillor Epp was the liaison back then. We looked at different ideas for different kinds of sport court tiles, making it multi-use. It's not big enough of a tennis court for competition size, but it still does get used, similarly to the bike jump park, which was being used ferociously last night with some very energetic youth and their bikes. These are just like the gymnasium, which is getting a bit more use now through West Shore. These are some other recreational activities that are happening here within Metchosin. People don't always have to leave or want to be able to leave, but these are interests that people have. I don't know if there's money in the budget for that. Mr. Creek and I met yesterday. We talked a little bit about what the budget was for the school. This might help out. I do know that there's probably, I don't know for a fact, but in the last 2 years that I've been looking at grants, there are some sports grants. There's, again, with all grants, it's how you collaborate with other organizations and that sort of stuff. So these are just interests that these two gentlemen have brought forward that are recreating here at home. And it's, again, something for us to consider. So that's what those two are about. Mr. Graham actually gives us some diagrams here of things that he's looked at in the past, and I believe he included, he may have included a link to, well, maybe not here, but in correspondence I had with him, there was a link to a grant, and I looked at it today, and it deserves a little bit more in-depth look at it. There were 3 or 4 different components. Not all apply, and it's just closed now, so it would have to be in the next year when it opens up again. So just things to look at, not to put on the back burner, but to consider in the future. Maybe not high priority when we think about the emergency, all of our emergency services is a really big chunk of our budget. And then going on to Mr. Brown's letter, we've already talked at length about Mary Hill Pilt. I'm hoping that we actually answer some of the questions that are what Mr. Brown is looking at here. We did have the drawdowns that the CFO provided, and he talked about a glide path. I'm not sure if that's the same thing as the drawdowns or not. Yes, okay. So those are the three correspondence we've received, and I suspect at each meeting we'll probably have correspondence, as our community is very aware of how we're investing their tax dollars. Councillor Gray and then Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, just to say, we did receive also some time back a, not sure a proposal, but an idea from Carol Voigt about pickleball courts combined with tennis courts. And so there is some interest in the community for sure. I guess the question or the issues that we have are, where are we going to spend money, and a call on that money. But I think the idea of recreational facilities is an important one. We certainly put a lot of money into the school gym. But as we look at this, if it comes up, maybe it should be one of the things that comes in the capital project, which we can then look at it and discuss priorities at the time. And then the other question I would have, just in terms of preparing for that, is what's the role of the West Shore Parks and Rec, and what are they thinking about? They've had some thoughts about extending their reach, and how might they do that? And is there a question of funding involved, or how would that all work? So a great idea. Just the problem, again, that we've already been talking about tonight, is money.
Right, and on that, West Shore Parks and Rec, obviously we have been promoting Metchosin as one of the satellite places to go, that we don't have to build brand new. That was something that I know I talked about at the board when we were talking about the master plan, that it costs a lot to build, but there's buildings around, like our gym is newly renovated. There is an interest to do more programs in there, and just balancing that with the people that are already using it. Mr. Creek and I have talked about other things that West Shore could do here in Metchosin, using our fields, doing camps with kids, maybe even tying in arts and culture, that sort of thing, again, as a satellite, because there's people from Royal Bay that'll come here, or the border of Langford as well. And not to be duplicating services, we put a great deal of money into West Shore, and we have just built pickleball courts and moved our tennis courts over, so there's investment there as well. So again, not to duplicate, but this exploration wasn't just pickleball and tennis, it was basketball, hoops, that sort of things, outdoors as opposed to everything just being indoors. So finding that balance, as you say, as we do with the funds. Councillor Shukin.
The only, I'm just wondering about an action, or even just a sentiment that we can pass on to Mr. Graham. And my sense is that, as great as this would be, it just is probably not a priority this year. That's the sense I'm getting from our discussion. But what would be interesting to do is to get a sense of cost. So when maybe the opportunity comes in future years, and it's interesting, maybe there is a chance for West Shore Parks and Rec to do some sort of satellite investment. So even just maybe as we go on our travels, understand what maybe these things cost. And Mr. Graham has provided us some examples about where these are, or where these have been. So, but yeah.
Councillor.
I think the best chance to fund something like this is through grants. The renovations in the gym were totally funded by a grant, and we have applied twice, 2 different years, for a grant to replace a tennis court with a sport court, or at least lay it over top, and didn't get either one. That doesn't mean that we can't keep going. In fact, the residents, like the ones that rode, are concerned if they could keep their eyes open for grants, so that we kind of know when they come along. I mean, we see some of them come into us, but not all of them. So, I mean, it would be great to have that, the tennis court. It is an asset, as you said. It'd be great to have that tennis court restored.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Little.
And I think the key to the success of some of these grants now, the code word is collaboration. So if we can show that we're collaborating with First Nations in particular, or other districts or municipalities, we have a greater chance. For instance, I went to the ribbon cutting of the 100th anniversary of the Langford Tennis Club. And they told me when I was at the ribbon cutting that during COVID, they used Metchosin Tennis Court, and one of them did put up that sign, Royal Metchosin Tennis Club. And so if we and I I think it's a rumor, but I don't know if this is correct, but I think the Langford Tennis Club is going to again be looking for another site, because right now they're at Roy Roads and they will be looking for another site. So maybe we can pitch that in a grant. And I agree 100% with Councillor Epp that the way to go is grants. Every month or every few months when we get a report at the CRD, I send it after the meeting to our CAO, so he's got a full list of all the grants available in Canada. And so surely we could apply, and I've had great success personally with grants, and so I'd be willing to help with those grant applications.
The Langford Tennis Club actually came and gave a presentation at West Shore Parks and Rec because their tenancy is up with Royal Roads. And so the administration is working with them to see if we can have a contract or not down there at West Shore, because we certainly have the facility to do that. And usually when we do that, we have 25 tenants with West Shore Parks and Rec. And so the contracts are written up in a way that they get blocks of time so that we still have space for our patrons to come in as well, and for scheduling of different, like a tennis camp or other things. Pickleball just had a great big national competition there this last year, so that brought in a significant sum of money to, and because it did cost money to build it, and that. So those are sorts of collaboration that West Shore is doing as well. And so I'm waiting to hear whether or not that is where they have their tenancy. I don't know, but certainly their president was a former councillor here, so she's well aware of our facility we have here. So yeah, good things to keep in mind. Good. Okay, any other comments before we close? If not, I'll ask for an adjournment, please. Councillor Gray, moved by Councillor Gray and seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.